here we are. President Trump's new executive orders.
First week of the new Trump administration focused on immigration reform.
And with some of his cabinet secretaries going to work this morning, Erica Brown reports on the military and defense focus that's expected this week.
Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth arrived at the Pentagon Monday for his first full day on the job and promised to move swiftly implementing President Trump's agenda.
Our job is lethality and readiness and warfighting. We're going to hold people accountable.
During his comments, Hegseth previewed some of the military-related executive orders President Trump is expected to sign. They include policies for transgender service members, a ban on several diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives.
Now, policies for transgender service members. Before, the policy was a ban. The policy was there is no transgender service members because they cannot serve in the armed forces because we do not believe that they can offer something of use to the United States. The general philosophy was, and this is just me being blunt about the way that I believe that they truly viewed it, is that if somebody is transgender, that means that they are mentally unwell because there's no such thing as being transgender. Therefore, if somebody is that mentally unwell, especially if they are going to be pursuing some sort of like medication of that, for example, estrogen, which has, impact on bone density and otherwise, then this is not somebody that we would want on the battlefield. Because if they're mentally unwell, we don't want them on the battlefield with a gun. And if they're going through these treatments, are they going to be able to uphold the same physical standards as the rest of the armed forces? Now, when it comes to the second part of that about the physical standards, before the first part of it, there's a lot of fat fucking losers in the military. And I'm not trying to be mean. That's not me saying screw them. That sounded like the meanest, most unpatriotic statement in history. But what I'm saying is that there are people all throughout the armed forces that when it comes to the idea of physical accomplishment, they're not all that good. They might be able to do the rudimentary amount of push-ups. They might be able to do, basic rifle training stuff, shoot a target down range, not particularly well. But the things that they offer the armed forces is not really that they're a fucking physical masterclass. Is that this guy in his big spinny chair while stuffing his face with Cheetos is a whiz when it comes to the Google Sheets and knows how to manage the logistics for an entire military compound much better than anybody else on staff, and therefore is helping make the compound more efficient and more effective, and therefore making our national defense more efficient and more effective. And so, to me, the military is such a gigantic organism with so many different parts. What am I not going to expect a fat, out in shape military cook on a big ass aircraft carrier? So when it comes to the second part of that, depending on the role, as long as they can still fulfill the physical requirements for the role, I don't think the physical stuff really matters all that much, right? Now, for the first thing about the mental unwellness, people can do their jobs perfectly fine, living happy and healthy as a transgender person. If somebody is mentally unwell while they're trans due to, for example, the extremely high amounts of depression within the community and suicidality and suicidal ideation, and the negative effects of gender dysmorphia, if they're dealing with that in a way that they cannot do the job, then the reason that they can't do it, it's because of the effects of their life from being trans, i.e. of how they've been treated, experiences they've had, trauma, and they can't do the job. But it's not a one-to-one, they are trans, therefore they have these things, therefore they have these things, they cannot do the job. If you don't think there's people in the army with depression, dysphoria, sorry, not dysmorphia. If you don't think there's people in the military with depression, if you don't think there's people in the military who are sad all the time, if you don't think there's people in the military who have mental problems, then obviously you have not met enough soldiers, especially if they've been in the service enough. Now, for me, my experience is a little different because I've not only seen, I've lived in a household raised by a U.S. Marine, but I also, saw a lot of other foreign servicemen who's actually been, through the shit in Ukraine. And so it's a little different, but even if that's the case, it would be the same case with anything else. If they have depression and they're going to kill themselves, take a rifle out of their hands and give the medical treatment. It shouldn't change when it comes to a transgender service member. Just because due to a bunch of sociological factors within our society and stuff that we don't completely understand. Many of them have, mental anguish due to the conditions of their existence. Does that mean now we should now close off this pool of potential recruits, say that they don't have the ability to be treated like anybody else if they can offer service to their country, in order to what? Stigmatize them? I mean, what is the beneficial effect of doing this? Does this make the Chinese quake? Does this shift our relationship with the Russians in some way? No, it doesn't. All it does is take a small, admittedly small pool of recruits when it comes to transgender people who want to join the armed forces, but it closes them off when we already have a recruiting crisis. So if they go back through with the transgender military ban, it's just going to be the same performative, pulpit pounding nonsense.
And reinstating service members discharged for refusing to get the COVID vaccine.
Now, this is the thing that gets me is this going to be like a one-time culture war W for the anti-vax types, or is this going to be a continuous thing? Because if you've ever been in the Army, if there's one thing the Army likes to do, it's to get you on the needle, okay? They love you on the needle. And not heroin, but vaccines. They're going to pump your arm through a vaccine after vaccine after vaccine after vaccine, especially if you're going anywhere. You're getting on a boat and you're going to the Pacific, ooh la la, here's 20 vaccines. You're going off to do a small deployment, like a short stint deployment in Djibouti, just doing some guard work, here's a bunch of vaccines. They will pump you full of vaccines. So my question is, number one, why does this shift significantly when it comes to this particular vaccine, that the requirements of a job would have it, so you would have to get it? And number two, will this be a continuous policy where now in the future we're going to have people going to, Indonesia, and they're going to need to get certain vaccines because they're not from there, or they're going to be going to places where, if they just drink the water, it's going to maybe affect them a little differently. And they're like, well, it's my right not to get vaccinated. I assume for efficiency's sake and efficacy's sake, this is just going to be a one-time thing. But, when you're pushing RFK up there and you start to set a standard and you advance a cultural movement and phenomenon, it can have downstream effects that you might not have originally intended.
The president is also expected to sign an executive order building an Iron Dome missile defense shield for the United States, similar to Israel's Iron Dome shield.
On the immigration front, President Trump is declaring victory after a weekend standoff with Colombia over return flights of undocumented migrants.
We'll get to this in a second. An Iron Dome defense shield. Is this the best use of America's resources? Mind you, the Republican Party is supposed to be the party of fiscal responsibility. And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be any air defense system in the United States, but we're also talking about how the United States is, overstretched. We're spending money on too many things, that we need to be more careful when we talk about how we spend our time, political capital, and our resources, that it's not endless. I mean, Trump is the person who added 25% of our total federal debt, so maybe this will be falling on deaf ears when it comes to him, but that party over there was supposed to be the party of fiscal responsibility. Now, it's not surprising me that it hasn't acted as such, and one of Trump's first acts was him trying to raise the debt ceiling because they didn't campaign on it. And if Trump's not campaigning on it and he sees that it's not really getting a response from his base, then why should he care about a principle just because the rest of the boring suits in the Republican Party care about said principle, or a certain percentage of the suits in the Republican Party care about said principle? Anyway, putting that aside, I just don't know how efficacious this would be in comparison to putting those resources elsewhere. What threat would this be against? Would this be, because it can't be Canada, Mexico, so who... if it's like an intercontinental ballistic missile defense system in order to try to get a leg up on in a atomic weapon scenario, at least I could see that as just, I'd have to hear more about this because the missile defense system in the way that Israel has it, I don't know how useful it would be and how hard it would be to cover every inch of the United States, how expensive that would be.
The country's president initially said he wouldn't accept the flights, saying the U.S. cannot treat Colombian migrants as criminals. That prompted President Trump to threaten a travel ban on Colombian government officials and 25% tariffs on imported goods, increasing to 50% in a week. Colombia threatened tariffs of its own, but ultimately backed down.
Sends a message to other countries that the president means what he says and that he is going to deliver punishment if countries don't cooperate.
With immigration crackdown operations ramping up across the country, Immigration and Customs Enforcement reported nearly 1,000 arrests Sunday. Erica Brown, CBS News.
1,000. Okay, so I do want to throw out there quickly, this thing that's said around here, about, like, you know, the Colombians are responding with their own tariffs. Look, the Colombians, bad place, bad time. Bad place, bad time. No one wants to be the first nation that picks a fight with Trump in the second presidency where Trump's going to want to send a signal. No one wants to be the first one. And, I mean, if they were to be the first one, that would be demonstrably horrible for their nation, for the Colombians, because what would you do then? If Trump is just trying to use you not necessarily as a tool to improve the relationship or get the best deal specifically out of Colombia, but as a tool to try to use you as a symbol to intimidate others to get the best deal out of everybody else. No one wants to be that guy. No one wants to be that guy, because then it could be past the purpose of even trying to get the best deal, or even making a concession might not even be what is necessary. Point is, it makes sense that I think they're backing down. And look, this right here is what I would expect when it comes to, like, a use of tariffs and international diplomacy. I think he goes pretty balls to the wall on it. Immediately 25%, 50% in a week if you do not concede. And I'm going to be putting in travel restrictions on government officials from Colombia. What a wild, like, the tariff stuff I expected, but the travel restrictions, under what? It's just whatever means you have to retaliate, you retaliate with. There's not a rhyme or reason or, like, anything that's connected to it. Like, oh, you're doing this when it comes to migrants in our nation. Well, then we're going to place this when it comes to traveling to the United States because we're angry with the relationship of how our peoples are moving and No, it's just, nope, we're going to stop the government officials from moving around. It's finding whatever levers are possible to apply pressure. There's not really a principle behind the specific application of pressure or a symbol even necessarily being sent through a specific thing, because Trump will just openly tie it, where it's like, for example, I could see Trump doing something where the Mexicans don't agree to make a deal with the United States. So the United States says, fine, we're going to retaliate by putting these sanctions on imported well, actually, this is a better example when it comes to Greenland. We're going to put a sanction on your imported fish product. Now, what does the imported fish product have to do with, not them listening to whatever Trump concession when it comes to, moving ships along the Arctic? Very little. And so that could be a problem if you're not being explicit about what you're tying these consequences to, where there can be a lot of vagueness. But with Trump going out there and just saying, do this or we will do this to you, I think the clearness, the upfront and honest nature of the strong arming kind of assists in making sure that it's kind of transparent. At least it's clear where the consequences are coming from, even if it doesn't look like there's any principled tie to, for example, a government official travel restriction, which you would place if their government officials had, I don't know, committed some war crime, or you were sanctioning them due to them assisting America's enemies, I don't know, instead of a dispute over migrants. Colombia